Hello, dear students, and probably also some members of the faculty joining us today in this live stream. I wonder if some of you could make a guess where I am. I had promised you during the last meeting that we are going to have our live streams from different locations on campus. I wonder if you can guess where we are. In fact, this is my favorite room in the Schloss. It's the tower room at the back of the library, which is a wonderful place for reflection and reading. And so from there, I am greeting you today on this 23rd of April. As I wrote you today, and I hope you've had the opportunity to read the email I sent out to the students and also to my colleagues in the faculty, I would like to move our weekly live streams to another level. And I already started doing that slowly during the past live streams, and especially last week as I gave you a challenge, something to think about, to reflect on. I would like to move our discussions to a bit of a more metaphysical level. And I also therefore really invite you to participate, and as when I finish my reflections, which as always will be between 10 and 15 minutes, I invite you to really participate in the discussion by using the chat function, which, as you see, I have here next to myself. What have been my thoughts on this whole corona crisis that we find ourselves in? I've already shared some thoughts with you during the past couple of weeks, but lately it has had a profound impact on me, going deeper into this situation and really trying to understand what is going on in our world. And I have come to this following observation. I'm not saying that's the truth, that's just my observation, and I would like to use this observation as a basis for us to debate on the big question: how can we create this common vision, as Pope Francis calls it, to bring the world out of this situation, out of this crisis? So, there is a thought I have had, and that is the following. I am not in any way disputing, obviously, the seriousness of this pandemic. I'm not a medical expert, I'm not a virologist, so I am not in any way passing judgment on it. It's clear that it is very serious. It is clear that many people are dying. It's clear that many people are in hospitals. So I want you to understand that to start on the right basis. Secondly, I am also not going to question specific measures that have been taken by governments or by the church. I'm not going to question these either in specific measures. What I would like to look at with you today is the larger picture. Why has our world, why have our societies responded to this specific global crisis, to this pandemic in this specific way? Because that is a question we should ask ourselves to be able to look into the future. And my analysis is that first and foremost, there has been a Pavlov reaction. A Pavlov reaction of fear leading to panic. Now, once again, I am not questioning the seriousness of the pandemic. I'm not questioning the need for measures to be taken. I'm looking at the larger picture. There has been a Pavlov reaction of fear leading to panic. And why is that? I think this is because of the following. During the past decades, our world has increasingly come to a point where society has come to the conclusion that we are entirely self-made, that we entirely control life, death, and creation. And the rapid secularization, the godlessness in our society has led to a point that mankind has in general said, we don't really need God. We don't really need this overarching structure, this pre-political order. We don't need any of that. We can decide for ourselves. And I want to give you 2 examples to show you what I mean with that and why I think we have come to this Pavlov reaction of fear leading to panic. The first example I would like to give you is the very interesting and very saddening fact that right in this pandemic, the abortion industry is doing everything in its power to make abortion something of an essential medical service. And on the other side of the spectrum, there has been euthanasia, where, for example, the Dutch government has recently passed a law in which it wants to introduce euthanasia in case of dementia. Those are 2 situations where mankind is showing that it really thinks that it controls life and death. Now, how does that work? And how does that lead to this Pavlov reaction? This is the following. We have built ourselves an illusion that we control life and that we control death. And we built that illusion by packaging nicely our interventions in life and death. Abortion is called a choice. It's called a human right. And it's all dealt with in a clinical way, in clinics. On the other side, euthanasia is being referred to as something relating to human dignity, to the absence of suffering. So what we've been doing is we've been whitewashing death. We've been purely whitewashing death by covering up our culture of death with words, with phrases, with ideologies. On the one hand, it's all about choice, it's all about privacy. Therefore, you cannot in any way, say anything about that. And on the other side of life, it's all about, it's about dignity. We do not want people to suffer. And what has happened? And in between there's a lot. There are many ideologies where we as human beings are tampering with life. I think of the ideology of transgenderism. I think of the whole debate on climate change, where despite the fact that indeed we are responsible for creation and that there is a moral responsibility to take care of our earth, it doesn't mean that we as human beings have the power to control the temperature of the earth. Yes, we should fight for the good of the environment out of a moral obligation, but not because we want to control the temperature of the earth as that being the first reason. So there are all these aspects where we are continuously trying to control life, death, and creation. And suddenly there comes out of nothing a virus. And a virus that, I've said it before, is invisible, is inaudible, and seems to be uncontrollable. And we get in panic because we're not used anymore to be confronted with this harsh reality of death. Because we have been covering up death. We have been whitewashing death. We have been pushing it away. On the one hand, once again, at the beginning of life, we put it in clinics and we put it under all sorts of so-called rights. And at the end of life, we put it under the noun of human dignity and of wanting to do away with suffering. And in between, we do it with forcibly wanting to control every aspect of life and denying the realities of creation. And suddenly comes this virus, and it shows us that as human beings, we do not have control over life and death, and that this small virus is confronting us with death in a massive way as we haven't seen since the Second World War on a global scale. We are massively confronted with death. And that has put our society in shock, in deep shock, because we don't know how to deal with death anymore, because we've always been pushing it away and whitewashing it. So there came the Pavlov reaction of fear and panic. Because there is an important consideration here. Once again, I am not putting into doubt or criticizing any specific measures. I'm not the one to judge that. But I am looking at the larger picture. And what do we see? That those measures are taken all together, leading to a catastrophe that we're only beginning to see. Yesterday, the United Nations rung the alarm bell, saying that a famine of proportions not seen for a long, long time is coming our way because of the corona crisis. And there are many other examples, but this I found the most shocking example. Poverty is a real concern. So why do we need to look at this larger picture? Because we need to look at our world, how our world is going to be when this is over, and how our world in fact is going to be in the next weeks or months. Because many, many more people are going to suffer, not directly from the coronavirus, which is already bad enough, but many people, probably many more people, we don't know, are going to suffer from the consequences of this crisis and from the consequences of the measures that were being taken, that are in part inspired, and I'm saying deliberately in part, because many measures are indeed sensible measures. But in part, these measures are also inspired by fear, by trying to hold on to, dramatically trying to hold on to what we've always had. But that is not possible. So looking at those consequences, we have to ask ourselves the hard question, what now? How can we protect the vulnerable? How can we help the vulnerable? How can we be sure that this situation is not completely getting out of hand? And there I am convinced, and there I'm coming to the conclusion of my reflection on this point, there I'm convinced that strong Christian leadership is required. We need Christian leaders to stand up, to work for the common good, not just for the good of one country, because we've seen one thing that is understandable, but at the same time also shocking to see. There has been, yes, a lot of solidarity, but on the other hand, there has also been a lot of countries going back into themselves and only looking at themselves and not looking at the wider picture, the wider world. And we have to start doing that because we have to look at the common good. So when Pope Francis, during Mercy Sunday, last Sunday, in his sermon said that if we do not forge an all-encompassing vision for humanity, then there will be no future for humanity. And how right the Holy Father is in that respect. So what I would like to do with these few thoughts, and deliberately provocative thoughts, I would like to invite you to join me in a discussion, in a debate within the ITI, and hopefully that debate will extend to other people, where we're going to ask ourselves that question: what is our common vision for humanity? And how can you, as students of the ITI, as Christians, and you, my colleagues in the faculty, and then also leading to how can we as the ITI, as one aspect, but how can each one of us work on this common vision so that the world doesn't fall deeper and deeper into the abyss in which it is threatening. It looks like it's going in that direction, but how can we build a real sense of the common good? So that's why I invite you to reflect on, and I now open the chat room for discussion, for your comments. What I will do is, if you send your comment, your thought, I will read it out and I will respond to that, and I hope that in the next 10 to 15 minutes we can have a lively debate about that. maybe a question to add to this debate is, what do you think as a young generation, as students, what do you think is the sort of leadership that is needed? What is the sort of Christian leadership that is needed at this point? That's one concrete question for you. What would you like to see in the leaders who have the responsibility to bring us out of this crisis with the help of our populations? That's the one question. And the second question is very concretely, have you already reflected on how you can concretely contribute to this? That I would be very interested to hear. Is there an example you can give of how you have an idea of how you can concretely contribute to this? And I realize, this seems to be a huge theme that can very easily become sort of a nice philosophy debate, but it's actually very concrete. And I'd be very interested to hear from you on that. Yes, thank you. What comes to my mind, one of the students here brings in, what comes to my mind spontaneously is that we need to share our knowledge, our understanding of the world, the society and human life. Many people behave in unmeaningful ways because they have not had the chance to receive a good sound education that forms the human person. In fact, this is a wonderful comment. I was just actually corresponding exactly about this theme with a priest in Africa who is working with politicians there. And what he wrote me is that what Europe actually needs and has been missing is the sort of visional Christian leaders that Europe knew after the Second World War. Not only Europe, in fact, he also gave me a list of names of such Christian leaders in Africa. People who really lived their faith in a very personal and specific way, and who wanted to integrate their faith and their principles as Christians into their responsibilities in political office. And that brought about a series of great inspirational Christian leaders in various parts of the world. If I look at Europe, people come to mind like Konrad Adenauer, like Robert Schuman, like Alcide de Gasperi, a great Italian, and people who really shaped post-war Europe in an important way, because for them, their Christian life was a unity with their political responsibility. And they actually integrated Christian principles relating to the common good, to Catholic social teaching. They integrated that into their political work and therefore had a lasting impact on society. So I agree with you that indeed what is needed here is that we need to much more actively share what we know, share our knowledge with others. And I think there again, we here at the ITI are in a unique position because we have an international student community, we have an international body of faculty and staff members from around the world, and we have this great pearl here of our study and community and prayer life here, where a lot of knowledge and wisdom comes out that we can and should actually share with people around the world. So I really invite all the students and all of us to maybe even use this crisis that we all find ourselves in and that limits us in certain ways, to use this crisis actually to share much more with people around us and people, you say it very beautiful, so that we can use this crisis actually to grow into living more meaningful lives, which is in fact also what the Holy Father has been saying all the time. And I also like very much what you say is that It's good, sound education that forms the human person. Now, obviously, that is what we're all about at any Catholic institution of learning. That's where Catholic education is about. It's about forming the human person. It's not about it's not about teaching people skills. That's not the first goal of a Catholic institution of learning. The first goal is to forming the person. The skills will come later. If we form the human person well, then the skills will come later. They will either come by themselves, or we can learn those skills as we go on studying in other ways. So thank you for that question. The next question is, the church needs to reopen and sacraments should be distributed. I'm happy to see Austria as an example. Yes, obviously we have all been suffering from that. And as I've said before to you, history will show whether the measures taken by the church in this regard were the right ones. It's difficult to judge at this point. All the more important is that the sacraments are brought back. I'm very grateful that in Austria the churches have remained open all the time, and many parishes, like for example my own, has had daily adoration, so that has been a great help. But there have also been enough countries where churches have been closed. Or I heard actually today from a member of our board that in the United Kingdom, the Church of England has even forbidden priests to go into their churches, into their locked churches, to actually have liturgies and even to be there. Luckily, that has not happened with us. Now, as to the sacraments, I would just want to remind you of the beautiful words of Pope Francis last week during one of his morning masses, where he said, we are in the danger under the current situation, no matter how important the measures are that need to be taken to protect the population from this virus, we are in the danger of virtualizing the church. And he then went on to say the church can only live through the sacraments and through the community of the people of God. So yes, absolutely, we need the sacraments to return. The next comment is regarding leadership. At the least, for example, from parents, it is a great feeling indeed and value when the leader sees in his team members what they are good at and what of their talents can be brought out to contribute to the team. Yes, absolutely. This is one of the biggest challenges and the most important things of anybody leading an organization or a group of people, is for that leader not to seek importance or prestige for him or herself, but to first and foremost focus very much on how can I as a leader bring out the talents in each of the people in my team. In fact, there's a great book written about that by a former commander of a US nuclear submarine. I forget his name at the moment, but he calls it the importance of leaders forming leaders, and not leaders creating followers, but leaders creating leaders. And I think that very much goes into your comment, because what he describes in this great book is how he has tried to change decades of US Navy policy in creating followers on board into actually creating leaders on board, where people within the team are really motivated and helped by the leader to become leaders themselves in their area of responsibility. And this has led to impressive results. And it also brings me to the thought of the importance of servant leadership, where the leader is really there to serve the common good and to also always have as his first or her first concern the good of the others. So yes, the example is absolutely essential in that, and bringing out the talents to contribute to this real leading, because real leadership can only happen when the strengths of the people that are being led are brought to the fore. That's when real leadership is happening. And I would say the current global crisis in which we find ourselves truly calls for such leadership. So a very good point you made there. I'm looking at the time. It's 6 o'clock. I have no more comments, and I would like to stick to the discipline of not keeping you too long with these weekly conferences. So once again, I invite you to also send me your comments. And as it comes to continuing these weekly live streams, I also invite you to reach out to me as students or as members of the faculty and staff if there would be a specific theme you would like me to bring up for discussion. I do not need to always choose these themes, and I would be very happy to hear from you if there are specific themes that are relevant as we deal with this overarching question of what all-encompassing vision can we together forge, as Pope Francis has called us to do, to actually make sure that there is a future for our humanity. So I'd be very grateful if you could send me suggestions of themes that we could discuss in this regard. Thank you very much for watching, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for contributing. God bless to you all. I hope you are well. You are in my prayers, and I look forward to continuing these weekly meetings. And as to practical announcements, especially with regard to graduation, these will come to you by email. Thank you.